and I'm glad we have, not that I don't like having class with just Virginia, but it's nice to have more than one person here in class. So yeah, this is the last spiritual mentoring group from me while I'm in Israel. I'm traveling to the United States on Tuesday, and I'll be there for about 3 weeks. So the next few weeks we'll be having, we may have to work out the details as far as how that's going to work time-wise. I have to figure out because I'm flying on Sundays. So it may be a little complicated. I may have to just do a kind of like, hey guys, let's do it on this day instead, and then people can watch the recording. Okay, so welcome to Spiritual Mentoring Group. Today is December 10th, 2017, and this week's Parsha is Mikeitz. All right, let me share the screen. Right, so this week's Parsha is Mikeitz. Last week, we ended with Yosef in prison after having been framed by Potiphar's wife. While he was in prison, Yosef made the best of a bad situation, showing his true integral self. Now, I use the word integral because the word integral describes something that has integrity. Yes, we usually use the word to mean an important part of something, like that's an integral part of whatever, but that's not actually what, I mean, that's one of the definitions of integral, but integral means that it is something that completes the whole of something, but it also means whole or complete. To have integrity means that everything is in alignment, that your actions match your words and your beliefs. And if they don't match, then you don't have integrity. So if you do, then you have integrity and your being is integral. You are complete. So Yosef was one of the 12 tribes. He was the son of Yaakov and his beloved wife Rachel. And his family heritage was about kindness and compassion and giving and being true to the one and only God. He was not the shepherd, he was the learner, the philosopher, the dreamer. Although he was not the firstborn son of Yaakov and would not officially have had the position of priest for the family, he was the firstborn son of Rachel. So in last week's Parsha, Yosef interprets the dream of the king's cupbearer and his baker. And when he sees that the cupbearer is being released from prison, he asks him to remember him to Paro so that he might be released. Now, this week's Parsha starts 2 full years after that. Some of the commentators say that his request to the cupbearer showed a lack of faith, an imperfection in his soul that needed an additional 2 years of prison to repair or fix. This time, it's Paro who has the dream, and he dreams that he is standing by the Nile River, and from the Nile were coming up these 7 healthy, beautiful, fat cows. And then after them, 7 scrawny, ugly, emaciated, sick-looking cows come up from the Nile, and they devour the healthy cows. After that, Paro has a second dream, this time with 7 healthy ears of grain, and then 7 ears of grain that were thin and beaten by the east wind. And just like the dream with the cows, the 7 thin ears of grain swallow up the healthy and full ears. And in both of those dreams, the sick, ugly, thin cows or grain don't even look like they consumed anything. They still look the same as when they began. Okay, so then he wakes up. So you have these 2 bizarre dreams, and you want to know what they mean, right? So Paro calls on all of the magicians and the wise men in the kingdom, and he tells them his dreams, but no one could give him an interpretation. Now, the cupbearer suddenly remembers Yosef, and he tells Paro that while he was in prison, a Hebrew young man in prison correctly interpreted his and the baker's dreams. So Paro sends for Yosef, and after he's shaved and bathed and given clean clothes, because you don't appear to the paro in, you know, looking like you've been in prison for however many years. So he appears before Paro. So Paro tells Yosef that he had heard that he could understand a dream and interpret it. But Yosef says, no, it's not me, but God who will give an answer that will bring peace to Paro. So Paro tells over his dream, and Yosef explains that the two dreams have actually the same meaning, and that there's going to be, well, and he explains that the reason that he had two dreams was because it was about to happen. It was happening very, very soon. And so he says there's going to be 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. In addition, Yosef tells Paro what he needs to do to bring Egypt through this famine. He tells him that he should appoint a wise man to oversee things and to collect all the food during the years of plenty and to distribute it in such a way that there will be a reserve of grain to keep the people alive during the famine. Now, obviously, we can all see what's coming, and Paro assigns Yosef to be that overseer of the land because Paro reasons, well, if this guy was smart enough to be able to not only interpret the dreams, but to then advise me how to proceed with it, he's a very wise man, and he should be the one who does the job. So Paro assigns Yosef to be the overseer of the land of Egypt, making him second in command only to himself. And it says that Yosef was 30 years old when this happened. Now, ironically, he married the daughter of Potiphar, who was his former master. Now, it's speculated that this was arranged so that his name was cleared of the accusation of having tried to seduce Potiphar's wife, because after all, who would let their daughter marry a man who had tried to seduce or /rape his wife, right? There's, of course, a lot of other speculation that goes into this story. Like Potiphar probably knew from the beginning that she was lying and that Yosef was innocent, but because of who his wife was, and again, the Torah doesn't actually tell us who Potiphar's wife was, but based on the way that he responded, it seems like he had to do something to Yosef. He couldn't just let the accusation die. But also, apparently, the punishment for rape and attempted rape would have been execution. So the fact that Yosef was only put in prison is a really good indication that Potiphar knew that Yosef was innocent. But again, he had to do something because of his wife's importance. We don't know, but possibly she was a sister or a daughter of Paro. So in the fourth Aliyah, the Torah changes location and the focus is back on Yaakov and his remaining 11 sons. The famine was not only affecting Egypt, but it was also affecting the land of Canaan, where Yaakov and his family lived. So Yaakov gathers his sons together, well, 10 of his 12 sons together, and he says that they are to go down to Egypt to buy grain so that they will survive. Now, of course, Yosef recognized his brothers when they showed up, but he's no longer 17. He's now 30. So he's been in Egypt for 13 years. And he speaks Egyptian. He looks like an Egyptian ruler. And clearly his brothers don't recognize him. It's actually kind of weird that they didn't even see the family resemblance. It could be that it's because he really did look and act so differently, or it could be another reason. Do you have a problem remembering names? Whenever I ask a group of people if they have trouble remembering names, they usually answer yes. There are an exceptional few who don't seem to have that hard a time remembering names, and there are also the very rare people who seem to never forget a name. I've met people like that. I don't know if you're familiar with Lenny Solomon of Schlockrock, but he can remember people's names or at least details about them. And when he only met them once, and then like 10 years later, he says, oh, yeah, I met you here and there, and you're this and that. It's like, whoa, how, and I mean, this is somebody who meets literally thousands and thousands of people. So there are a few people like that. And they might not remember the name, but they'll remember when they met you and significant details about how they met you or about your life. I know that both my husband and I have always had a hard time remembering names, but I've learned a trick or two that really helps me remember names. And I'm going to share that with you because I think it's really important. And after I share that with you, I'm going to tell you the reason that I believe that so many people have such a hard time remembering names. So the trick is that when someone says their name to you, stop and focus all your attention and intention on their face. Notice the features. It's not creepy. It really only takes a few seconds. And then say their name aloud again. If you can, do it 1 or 2 more times while really looking at them. Now, obviously, how much you do that is going to depend on the situation, because in some situations it may seem kind of creepy. But I tell you that this will double the percentage of names that you remember. Why do I say this? I have a theory that the reason that we don't remember people's names is because we don't actually see them as people. And I know at first glance it's like, wait, no. What are you saying? Like, I don't see you as a person? Of course I see you as a person. No, not really. The person in front of you who just introduced themselves to you and whose name went in one ear and out the other, they're just another face in the crowd of humanity. They're a number and a statistic, but they don't become a person for you until you take the time to make them a person in your own mind. Stop and consider the person. Look in their eyes. Listen to their story. Try to create an anchor. So what does this have to do with the Parsha? I don't care how long it's been. The only way to not recognize your brother, remember, he wasn't a baby. He was 17. So he was already mostly an adult when they sold him into slavery, okay? The only way to not recognize your brother is if you never saw him as a person in the first place. You never bothered to really get to know him, which makes sense in the context of what they did to him. I mean, think about it. How on earth could someone murder their brother just because they were annoying? Seriously. Okay. In the end, Reuven and Yehuda convinced them not to murder him and just sell him into slavery. But still, even when we want to kill our siblings or our kids, we don't really want to kill them. What we really want is for them to just stop being so annoying. And we don't kill them because they're our blood and they're people. And we see them as people, even if they're annoying people. It takes the ability to not see a person as a person in order to do what they did to him. So I would argue that they didn't see him as a person. They never actually saw Yosef the person. They conceptualized him. They never experienced him. And that's why they didn't recognize him when they came down to Egypt to buy grain. Now, take a second here. I don't know if you read the comic strip, but basically it's about not remembering names. And the punchline is, who was that guy? And he says, what guy? Like, he never even saw him, right? And that's like, unfortunately, that's the way it goes sometimes with us when we meet people. It's like we see them, but we don't see them. And what we need to do is learn to see them, not just as people, but as neshamas, as souls, as God sees them. It's really important. Okay, so this is another important part of truly living. We have to learn not to conceptualize people and events, but to actually experience them. Otherwise, we will come to the end of our lives and wonder where all the time went. The memories are no different than the memories that we have from reading a book or watching a movie, because we spend all of our time living in the concept instead of living in the experience. So the lesson from this is that we need to learn to live in the experience and experience the people we meet. Not only will we remember who they are, but we will live life in living color and experience the pleasure each experience has to offer us, instead of just being a bystander who watches as the movie of life runs by us. Okay, so that's it for the first part of the class today, and I ran through that really quickly. But does anybody have any questions, anything that you want to say or share?
I really appreciate that suggestion about looking at people's features up close to remember them.
Yeah.
Yeah, to remember their names better. I have mild face blindness.
Mm.
Um, and so I don't recognize people by their face usually. It's more the way you walk and a person's voice and things like that. But I'm gonna try that, focusing on their features to see if that makes any difference.
Sounds good. Definitely try it. It really made a huge difference for me. I mean, I meet lots and lots of people, especially not so much in the past 4 or 5 years, but before that, I was going on speaking tours 2 and 3 times a year. And so I was meeting literally thousands and thousands of people. And there was no way I could remember their names, but like literally I remembered nobody. It was crazy. And I realized that it was because I was just not seeing them as people. And it's a terrible thing to think about. We don't like to think of ourselves as being like that. You know, of course I see
Yeah.
them as people, but we're not seeing them as people. And if we can stop and actually let it soak into our head, this is a beautiful neshama that's in front of me. Here's a person who has been through a life and has a story, and just try to look at their eyes and look at their facial features and attach their name to that face, we're at least more likely to remember. It doesn't mean you're going to remember everybody, and it doesn't mean you'll remember it for a long time, but I think that you'll see that the percentage of people that you will remember their names will increase. So, all right, great, thank you. Virginia, do you have anything you want to share?
Not at the moment, thanks.
Okay. All right. Go back to that view. Okay, oops. Okay. Why is it showing? Okay, I don't know why it was showing the blank iPad instead of showing me, but that's what it's showing. Okay, well, there we go. Okay. All right, so now we're going to continue making our way through the Siddur. Remember that we just got to the first recitation of the Shema, which isn't the full Shema. The full Shema has 3 paragraphs, whereas this version of the Shema only has the first of the standard 3 paragraphs. And this is recalling a time when the Jews were not permitted to recite the Shema in shul, and so they said it at home, and then they said it again later on Shabbat anyway, during the Musaf on Shabbat when the guards had already gone. A double recitation of the morning Shema was kept as the tradition, and the first recitation, which would have back then been said at home, has been moved to here, which is during the last part of the section of the morning prayers, which we call the morning brachot. Okay, so last week we looked at the first prayer that follows the paragraph of the first paragraph of the Shema. And it starts with the words Atah hu ad shelo, that talks about God's existence before, during, and after creation. The second paragraph also starts with Atah hu, and here is the paragraph, and you can see it's a little long, so I'm not going to put you through the torture of reading it to you in Hebrew, but you can find it in the Siddur, and you can sound it out, and I'm sure that there are transliterated versions of it. But what we're going to do instead is we're going to, of course, look at the English. But there's what it says in the Hebrew, and here's what it says in the English. It says, "You are He, Hashem our God, in the heavens and upon the earth and in the highest heavens. True, you are He, the unknowable first. There was nothing before you. And you are He, the unknowable last. Besides you, there is no other God. Oh, gather the dispersed who hope in you from the 4 corners of the earth. Let all souls that enter this world recognize and know that you alone are the supreme God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all they contain. Who among all your handiwork above or below can tell you what to do or how to act? Our living and eternal Father in heaven, deal charitably and kindly with us for the sake of the honor of your great name with which you have distinguished us. Hashem our God, fulfill the promise that you made to us through your prophet Zephaniah, as it is written. At that time, I will bring you back, and at that time, I will gather you in. I will then make your fame and praise known among all the peoples of the world, when I return your captivity before your very eyes, says Hashem. Whew. Okay, let's take a look at this piece by piece.
I have one
Yes,
question.
sure.
We say this after the morning Shema?
Yeah, so I know that you've kind of missed a couple of sessions, but
Yeah.
when it's okay, so shortly after the morning brachot, there is the first Shema. We say the Shema 4 times a day, and the first 2 times we say during Shacharit, during the morning prayers, okay? The first one, which is done early on in the prayers, is so that you can get the Shema done as early as possible. And like I said, I don't remember the exact history now. I'll have to go back and look at it. But there was a time when this was instituted because the king, and I can't remember which ruling people it was at the time, was very threatened by the recitation of the Shema by the Jews, and so they outlawed the reciting of the Shema during the Shabbat prayer service in the synagogue. And so what the rabbis did at that time was they said, okay, say the Shema before you come to shul, but just say the first paragraph. That fulfills the commandment to say the Shema early, and then come to shul, and we will daven the first service, and then we will say the Shema again during Musaf, which is the additional Shabbat service, at which time the guard would have already left. So they would put guards at the synagogue door to make sure that the Jews did not say the Shema. So later on, when that was no longer necessary, they still kept the saying of the Shema twice in the morning, but they took the one that was done before shul, and they put that at the very beginning of the morning prayer service. And then because we don't do Musaf on weekdays, the second one is later on in the Shacharit morning prayer service, where it normally would have been anyway. So right now, so what we did was a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the Shema. It's the Shema, and I'll make sure that that's posted in the group. It may not have been uploaded, but I'll make sure it gets done, or maybe even tonight, so that you can maybe review the videos. But we do the we do the shortened version of the Shema, which is just the Shema and the first paragraph, because that technically fulfills saying the Shema. And then later on in the service, we will say the full Shema with the 3 paragraphs. But after we say the first paragraph in this morning preliminary prayer section, then we have a couple of prayers that start with Atahu, you are he. We went through one of them last week, and today is the second one. So this is after the first Shema of the morning prayer service, okay? So the first piece says, you are he, Hashem our God, in the heavens and upon the earth and in the highest heavens. True, you are he, the unknowable first. There was nothing before you, and you are he, the unknowable last. Besides you, there is no other God. Now, the section which is going to follow this prayer that we're looking at now is called the korbanot, or the sacrifices, right? And the sacrifices have got to be the one aspect of Judaism which is most baffling. We can speculate as to why God gave them as commandments to the Jewish people, and I myself have wondered about that. I've often thought that it's not that God wants sacrifices. In fact, in some of the later prophets, it seems fairly clear that it's not actually the sacrifices that God wants at all, but rather what those sacrifices represent, which is a broken and contrite heart. And that the reason that God gave the Jewish people sacrifices is because all of the nations that surrounded us offered sacrifices to their gods, and that if he didn't give us an alternative, we'd have done it anyway just to be like them, which of course would have been avodah zarah, idol worship. So in my mind, and again, I'm not saying that this is why God did it. I said that that was a thought that I had. In my mind, I can hear God basically saying, no, I really don't want sacrifices, but you want to offer sacrifices so you can be like everyone else. So if you're going to offer sacrifices, this is the way you'll do it. Now, that's not the wording of the Torah. We aren't told that we have a choice in the matter. They're given to us as a commandment. So if you take away this idea of the sacrifices being a compromise, you're left with this baffling set of rituals that seem to have very little to do with anything except that it's a complicated, bloody set of rituals. So the composers of the Siddur very astutely put this prayer before the sacrifices, because let's face it, once you've admitted that there is only one God and that he exists eternally from before the world was created, that he keeps creation in existence, and that he will exist long after we and everything in this material world are gone, it doesn't really matter if the commandment makes sense to our limited minds or not, because we've just admitted that we're pretty much nothing in comparison to God. So the prayer continues. You are not only pre-existent and eternal, but you are omnipresent. You exist in our world, above our world, and beyond our world. And you are so incredibly powerful and complex that we can't even begin to fathom what you are. We are working on getting our head in the right place concerning God's position and his right to give us commandments, even if they don't make any sense to us. Okay, the next piece says, oh, gather the dispersed who hope in you from the four corners of the earth. Let all souls that entered this world recognize and know that you alone are the supreme God over all the kingdoms of the earth. Now, these two sentences are, in my opinion, two different thoughts. We've just acknowledged that God is everything. So something as huge and crazy and pretty close to impossible as the ingathering of the exiles is certainly something that he can accomplish, and pretty much no one or no other force on earth can. So let's just kind of slip it in here. And then it continues with the prayer that everyone born from now on would recognize who God is. And this too is a pretty impossible request. But if anyone could fulfill it, God could. And both of those things together, the ingathering of the exiles from the four corners of the world and the universal recognition and belief in God, well, that would pretty much bring the era of Mashiach and peace on earth, right? So really, that's what we're asking for here. But rather than asking for this big global request of Mashiach, we ask for two more tangible components of it. Next, we say, you made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all they contain. Who among all your handiwork, above or below, can tell you what to do or how to act? So we just asked him to do something, and now I almost feel like this is so self-explanatory that I shouldn't even bother commenting on it. Again, God is so incredibly huge and powerful and wise that he made everything. So how can we tell him how to act? We can't. In our limited perspective, even be angry or feel that God has acted unkindly towards us, although we certainly do. I mean, and he made us this way, so he certainly understands that we feel the way that we do. But in this prayer, we are acknowledging that we really can't say anything. Of course, as you'll see in a moment, this is a prelude for us to say something. Go figure. Okay, the next line is, our living and eternal Father in heaven, deal charitably and kindly with us for the sake of the honor of your great name with which you have distinguished us. Hashem, our God, fulfill the promise that you made to us through your prophet Zephaniah, as it is written. Okay, now we're not going to continue. We're going to wait a second. Let me comment on this. So just as we said that we can't tell him what to do or how to act, in the next breath, we ask him to deal charitably and kindly with us. I think that the point of the statement is to say, we can't, God forbid, tell you how to act, but we're requesting that you be true to your nature, as if God would not be true to his nature, and act this way towards us so that in the end you will bring about the very thing that we were actually requesting, which is found in the last part of this prayer. And we finish it up with, and this is a quote from Zephaniah, at that time I will bring you back, and at that time I will gather you in. I will then make your fame and praise known among the peoples of the world, when I return your captivity before your very eyes, says Hashem. So here it's wrapping up. We had the passage that asked for the gathering of the ingathering of the exiles, and we had the passage that asked that every person born on earth would acknowledge and believe in God, which was essentially asking for him to bring Mashiach, right? And then we asked him to deal charitably with us and to fulfill the promise that he made, which is to bring us back and basically to establish the time of Mashiach, or bring in the full redemption of the world. So this goes back to the beginning of this prayer, which is that he would bring about the prophesied time of Messiah. It's been so long since those prophecies were made, right? About 2,700 years. He made a promise, and we're asking that he finally fulfill it so that we can see the final redemption and have an end to all the suffering that we endure here on earth. And there is a connection between this request and the next section, which is the sacrifices. It's said that the sacrifices were initiated in response to the sin of the golden calf. It's taught that had we not committed the sin of the golden calf, we would have seen the redemption with our entry into the promised land, and we would not have needed a temple or sacrifices because God would have dwelt physically among us, not physically like with a physical body, but his presence would have been tangible and literally among us. But because of the sin of the golden calf, a distance needed to be established, and that's why we had to have the temple. So excuse me. And of course, now we have been without the temple and the sacrifices for 2,000 years. And with the coming of the Mashiach, the temple will be rebuilt and the sacrifices will be reinstated. Although there is a belief that after the initial sacrifices, which consecrate the temple, the only ones that will continue are the ones that do not involve killing of animals. This is very good news to people who are vegans and animal rights activists. Now, this is alluded to in the book of Yeshayahu, Isaiah, and it actually makes sense considering how many people nowadays find the killing of animals repugnant. It's very interesting because I think in the days of Mashiach, a lot of the things that were written in the Torah are going to be adjusted because people today aren't the same as they were back then. You know, you think about some of the rules and laws concerning the treatment of women that are actually written in the Torah, and women today are different. We're educated, we're assertive, we're we can read, we own land, we do a lot of things that women back then didn't do, and that some of the laws were reflective of that time.
I'm hearing like
Yeah.
a radio in the background.
Really?
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody else was
No,
hearing that too.
no, not hearing it at all.
Okay.
So it's not coming from, Virginia. Virginia, are you hearing an echo or anything, or radio sound?
Not at all. It's absolute silent here.
Okay, so
Okay.
maybe you have some sort of a feedback or something coming through your computer where you're
Yeah, well, I'm on my phone, so
Ah.
I'm gonna check out for just a minute and see if maybe iTunes started playing
Okay.
without my
So
permission.
I'll use this as an opportunity to take a drink. My throat is starting to hurt. That's not good because I'm about to go on a speaking tour and I'm about to fly for like 24 hours. It's crazy. I'm leaving here at 11:30. Well, I'm leaving my house at 7, but I'm leaving Israel at 11:30, and I will, which would be 4:30 New York time, p.m. I land in New York at 5:30 a.m. and then I'm in the airport till like 3:15, and then I'm flying out to Cleveland, and I land sometime in the evening in Cleveland. So I will be in travel mode for over 24 hours, and that's never good for one's health.
Will you be coming to California at all?
Not this trip. Something that I mentioned last week, and I'm happy to mention it again, is I was actually kind of upset because there was a whole situation where I had this big rabbi from New York who called me this summer and said he wanted to bring me out to speak in New York around Hanukkah time. And so I tried to get some dates. Can you mute just because of the bird?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to mute that.
That's okay. No problem. So
I have 4 in the background.
Yeah, I can hear them.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm
I love
sorry.
birds, but it's...
Yeah, she's actually my support animal.
Oh,
So just let me know if she's distracting in the background, if you want me to turn off my video.
No, video's fine.
She's walking all over me.
Just the audio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happened was that this rabbi had called and invited, said he wanted to bring me out to several places in New York, and I thought, great. So I'll plan on doing a speaking tour around Hanukkah, even though normally I wouldn't because I want to be with my family at Hanukkah. So, but then I got a call from Jews for Judaism in Canada, and they said that they wanted to know if I was going to be in America in December. And I said, well, as it turns out, yes, I have plans to be in America during Hanukkah time. And so they asked if I would speak on Christmas, and I said sure. So I signed a contract with them. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get back in touch with this rabbi in New York who is like totally not answering me and avoiding me, or when he answers, it's like, I'm working on it. Contact me, whenever. So I'm thinking, okay, well, one speaking engagement is not enough to pay for my tour. So I managed to get another speaking engagement in Cleveland. But now at this point, we were already talking about October. For December, that's like very short. I mean, most shuls and organizations are already booked. Even the ones that wait last minute are booked for December by October. And so, and there was a place in Texas that I was supposed to go who backed out, and because he decided that he had already had a big name coming, and so, he couldn't bring me out as well. And so I had 2 speaking events, and meanwhile, the rabbi in New York is completely incommunicado. I even sent the Jewish Speakers Bureau woman after him to try to pin him down for an event, and like he was talking about January 5th, and I said, no, he had said originally Hanukkah time. I can't stay that long. And then I was kind of a little upset, like, Hashem, why did I get these 2 speaking engagements that I have now signed a contract for, so I can't back out of? It's just barely covering my flight. I'm not going to make any money on this. I really need at least 1 or 2 more events to make this worthwhile. And I was kind of like feeling a little sorry for myself. And then I was talking to my sister who lives in Western Maryland, and decided that, you know, I'll spend some of my free time with her, because the way that the flights worked out, I'm speaking in Cleveland on the 17th, and I'm speaking in Toronto on the 25th, but I'm not flying home till the 31st. So I have basically like 6 days and 6 days in between. So I was trying to work out which one I would spend with my sister and what I was going to do with the rest of the time. Meanwhile, my sister tells me that she ended up in the hospital the day before, and she had an infection around the lymph node under her left ear. And, oh, and by the way, they also found a small brain tumor. So I said, well, I've got this time. If you'd like, I'll spend both periods of time with you. Because my sister doesn't have any family anymore. I mean, she's divorced, and my mom and I are here in Israel, so she has no support. And so at some point, it was like a light bulb came on, and I realized that rather than Hashem only giving me 2 speaking engagements for my speaking tour, what Hashem did was he arranged for me to be able to pay for my flight to visit my sister. It was just a shift in my perspective and the way that I saw it. And so at that point, I didn't even pursue any more events, but I am going to try to put together something for the spring and see if I can get out to California during that one. So I'm going to start actually working on that like very soon. So if you know anybody who might be interested in bringing me out, please put them in contact with me, and we'll start working on some prospective dates. But yeah, so I only have the 2 speaking events because that is how I'm paying for my trip to visit my sister, rather than seeing it as a very small speaking tour. But
Wow, that's fantastic.
yeah, I mean, it was an amazing gift when Hashem allowed me to change the perspective and to see it that way. But let's finish up the class for today. So I wanted to show you, I was talking about how there's this idea that after the temple, the 3rd temple is built and the initial sacrifices are given in order to reinstate it and sanctify it, that the theory goes that the animals will actually offer themselves up for this purpose willingly, and having elevated themselves to a higher level, there will no longer be any animal sacrifices. And where this is gotten from, or the source in the Torah Tanakh that kind of is used to reinforce the idea, is actually one that you're familiar with, which is from Yeshayahu chapter 11, verses 7 through 9. This is part of the bigger passage, which is actually read outside of Israel. It's read on the 8th day of Passover. And it starts with, you know, a rod shall come forth out of Jesse, out of Yishai. And Christians see this passage as being messianic in nature. And it is in a way, but it's not telling about somebody who's already come. But anyhow, verses 7 through 9 say, and also the cow and the bear will graze, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. Think about that for a minute. A lion, animals, cats are carnivores. In fact, there's a very well-known vegan doctor that I follow who, you know, on stage, he says, don't you dare make your cats be vegan, because cats are designed to be carnivores. And if you try to feed them a non-meat diet, they will be sick, and that will be like abuse. You know, and if you don't want to own a cat because of that, that's fine, but don't try to turn your cat into a vegan. You can actually, a dog can adapt, but a cat cannot. Cats are carnivores by nature, by design. And here it's saying that at this time, when these miraculous things happen, when we have this righteous leader who doesn't judge by the sight of his eyes, who is very, very special, when that happens, the cow and the bear will graze together, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra or viper, and the weaned child will put his hand on the viper's den, and they will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. It's just a different way of looking at this passage that we're very, very familiar with. Rav Kook, as well as many other commentators, believe that humans and animals will all become vegetarian in the time of Mashiach. As it says in verse 7, the lion will eat straw like the ox. But that as part of this, there will be no more killing of animals for sacrifices or perhaps for any reason, since it says in verse 9 that they will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. Now, the word for destroy, that's translated destroy in this verse, in verse 9, the word is shchita. If you know anything about eating kosher meat, you know that shchita is killing an animal in a kosher way, right? Shchita is actually to shecht an animal. I mean, it's to kill the animal. I'm pretty sure that that's the only word, although we use it in context to mean kosher killing. But still, it says that they're not going to do shchita in all his holy mountain. That sounds like there's not going to be any animal sacrifices and we're not going to be eating animals anymore. So now, with all that being said, we prepare to pray the section on the sacrifices, which we'll look at next week. And I'll need to keep you informed, like I said, at the beginning of the class, because I may be flying during the time of our class. In fact, I'm pretty sure I will be flying during the time of our class. So I still may be able to do it. Maybe I'll do it from the airport. We'll have to see how it'll work. Or I may need to change the time, or I may pre-record it or something. So you'll just have to bear with me, and we'll be in touch about next week's class. Okay, does anybody else have anything that they want to say?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. You were talking before about the golden calf.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the sacrifices becoming, sacrificing cows and calves and things. And I'm wondering if like Hashem, gave that specifically to show us that, we can't worship animals because they can be killed easily. They're, you know what I'm saying? Kind of in a way of showing that the golden calf doesn't have any power, because look, you can go and you can kill a calf and you can sacrifice it to me, and in the process of doing that, people are seeing the animals bleed, and there's stuff that's done with the blood and the body, and I'm wondering if it's just a way to kind of hammer in even more that Hashem is beyond all of this.
That's a very interesting perspective. And I think if it weren't for the fact that the Israelites, when they created the golden calf, they didn't say that the golden calf was God or was a God. It was a replacement for Moshe, who was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and in fact, this actually affects whether or not one would view Christianity as idol worship, because they weren't worshiping the golden calf as a god. They were worshiping the golden calf as the intermediary between God and man. And if that was so horrible in God's eyes, and he was so angry from that, then wouldn't he equally be angry at us worshiping a man who is the intermediary between God and man? Like, literally, Jesus is an imitation of the golden calf. And so, but it's not that they were saying that the calf was God. They were saying that the calf would be a substitute for Moshe, who was an intermediary between God and man. So, but that doesn't mean that there isn't merit to what you said. It's actually an excellent point and way of looking at things, that in general, even if we take the golden calf itself out of the equation, that look, you're sacrificing these animals to me, they are not gods. And especially since we had come out of Egypt, there was probably some of this animal worship probably in the backs of their minds, because the Egyptians saw the animals as gods. So there's still very much, I think, validity to the point that you're making about the killing of the animals to show us that they are just flesh and blood and not to be worshipped. Sure, it's great. Okay, anything else? All right, ladies, I love seeing you guys and spending time with you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Those of you who are watching by recording. Virginia, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to wish you much success and safe travels.
Amen. Thank you. I'll be traveling on Tuesday. I'll be, like I said, I'll be flying out at 11:30 p.m. our time here in Israel. So that's 9:30 for you, Virginia, and 4:30 for, no, you're in California. So that's 1:30. I keep forgetting you're so far behind. Yeah, so for you, I'll be flying at 1:30, I think. I think that's right. Yeah, 10 hours.
Stay safe.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys next week and, seeing you on the Facebook page and stuff. All right.
Okay. Have a good one.
Thank you. Everybody have a good week.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.